Welcome back to Greek 1. This is lesson 10, the third declension. All right, today we are talking about the third declension, and it's a little bit of a bummer. I think when Greek students get to the third declension, they're like, "Oh man, I thought I was done with this." All right, so it's okay if this strikes you a little emotionally. Our relationship changes a little bit because I lied to you a little bit. Okay. This is where we're at so far, right? We've talked about the key case endings. I told you about the nominative, genitive, singular, and accusative. We said that there's different genders. And then I explained to you that these are the letters of the case endings, and then that the masculine ends in omicron, the masculine and neuter both end in omicron, and the feminine ends in eta or alpha. So you add these endings to the masculine, feminine, or neuter, and because they end in those letters, you sort of know what to expect. Well, I didn't want to tell you the whole truth because I don't want to scare you off, but the masculine, feminine, and neuter words don't always end like that. In fact, sometimes they end in consonants. A consonant is not a vowel, and it's any non-vowel, right? So like a K sound or an S or a T. That's a consonant. So if you have a word, and you will, that ends in a consonant, you can't use all the endings you've learned. The good news is that they're kind of rare. This doesn't happen a lot. And the bad news is they're a little different. But the good news, again, is that they're only a little different. If you look at the chart, it's not too bad, and we'll go through it. So first of all, if a word ends in a consonant, it is a third declension. Masculine endings are second declension. Neuter endings are second declension. And what that means is that they follow the same pattern because they end in omicron. And then feminine are first declension that end in iota or alpha. If it ends in a consonant, it's a third declension. That's the third pattern. And this new chart that you have on the right-hand side is that third declension. Okay. We study them separately because they require quite a bit more explanation. In fact, a lot more explanation. And honestly, Greek teachers just don't want to bum you out and scare you out the door. So that's why they're studied separately. They don't occur nearly as much as the first and second declension endings. And if you've already learned them, you'll see you pretty much already know them. But what happens is that the endings are kind of unpredictable because you're adding them to a consonant. They end up changing in weird ways, and if it's the first thing you learn in Greek, you're just going to get scared out the door. Now you've learned enough charts that you're kind of committed. I mean, this is lesson 10. So I kind of got you now, right? All right. So let's get into it. The first thing you got to learn is the square of stops. Here you have 6 letters. The top 3 are P, Vita, and Phi. These are called labial. And they're called labial because you're using your lips. If you think about it, to make a P sound, you're making a pop with your 2 lips coming together. The Vita is with your lips touching to make a soft B. And then the same thing with the Phi. Okay. You're using your lips to create those sounds. So that's why they're called labials. The velars are called velar because you're using the middle of your tongue on the soft part of the top of your mouth. So if you think of it, you just have to feel it out. Is this absolutely critical that you do this? No, but it's fun. People will watch you and they'll think you're such a weirdo. So go ahead and just try it out with me. So feel how you make a K sound. K, k, k. You'll notice that you're using your tongue, you're kind of bending it, and then that bent part, you're putting it up against the top of the roof of your mouth, And then as air kind of pops out, it makes a k, 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 k. The gamma is doing the same thing. It's just a little softer. Yeah, yeah. You bend your tongue, you put it up towards the top of your roof, but you don't make it. It doesn't totally touch. It's close, and then the air rolls over it. And the same thing with he. Same thing. It's just even softer. So they get softer as you go to the right. All right. The dental is that your tongue, the edge of your tongue, is touching the teeth at different points. So to make a T sound, if you feel your tongue, to make that soft Greek T, your tongue touches the base of where the teeth touch at the top of the tongue. Gosh, think about how much we're thinking about this now. You're in deep. All right, that's how you make a T. To make a Greek delta, your tongue doesn't go all the way to the top. It touches lightly the bottom half of your teeth. And that's how you get that soft delta. And then to get the theta, it barely touches the bottom of your teeth, if at all. And it just gets that much softer, delta. Anyway, that's how these things get their names. And the reason why it's important to us is because you got to know that if you have a word that ends in a consonant, these are all consonants, there's no vowels in here. If you have a word that ends in one of these consonants and you add a sigma to it, which by the way is the nominative ending, you're going to get a different letter altogether. So check this out. If you add the sigma to a word that ends in any labial, P, vita, or phi, you're not going to get the same spelling. It's going to extend in, it's not going to end in a P sigma or a vita sigma or a phi sigma. It's just going to end in a psi. If you have a word end in a kappa, gamma, or he, and you add a sigma to it, you're not going to get a kappa sigma. You're not going to get a gamma sigma or a he sigma. You're going to just get a xi. And then finally, if you add a sigma to a tav, a delta, or a theta, that letter drops out completely and you only get a sigma. Now, if you think about it, all of this makes perfect sense, because if you add a P and a sigma, what you're really getting is a PS sound. Well, Greek already has a letter for a PS sound, it's psi. So it's the exact same thing. And it's, if you think about it, a vita and a phi are related to the P because they're both making the same, they make their sounds the same way. And so if you add a sigma to it, it only makes sense that you get the same result. It's a psi. Same thing with the velars. If you think about it, if you add a sigma to a kappa, you make a KS sound. X. Well, Greek already has a letter that does that. It is a xi. So it makes sense that you're adding, that if you add a sigma to a kappa, you get that new letter xi. And then if you take that the next step, the gamma and the xi are both velars. They're shaping their sound in the same way that the kappa does. So adding the sigma makes sense that you get the exact same letter, the xi. With the dentals, why they drop out completely, I'm not exactly sure. So you have to pay the extra fee to figure out an answer for that. So sorry, I never heard the explanation for that. But my guess is that the sigma just overpowers it, but what do I know? Okay, so let's look at an example. You have a word like sarx. And theoretically, the root word of sarx has a kappa ending on it, right? So you take this root word and it ends in a kappa, and then you look at the third declension endings, which I just showed you. Here they are after the red plus sign. And if you want to make it a masculine, I'm going to try my mouse. Hopefully it shows up in this recording. If you want to make it a nominative singular masculine, right, then you add that sigma to it, And you would think you'd end up with a kappa sigma. That's what this next chart is saying. You would think you'd have sigma alpha rho kappa sigma. But instead, you get this weird other spelling, sarx. It's the same sound, but the spelling's a little different. So the reason why we're going through this whole process is because you'll look at that word, sarx, with that xi ending, and you'll think, I don't know any case that ends in a xi. And so what you have to know is that the letters change when you add a sigma to them. And so if you have a word that ends in a vita, then you're going to get a psi ending. If you have a word that ends in a delta, it's just going to be a sigma ending. And so you have to be able to kind of do this math that you have here on with this labial, velar, and dentals when you add that sigma, because the words are changing. And that's where this whole thing comes in handy. Now, notice another thing that's going to trip you up, and we'll talk about this later. The genitive singular ending is omicron sigma. That looks a lot like the nominative masculine singular ending that we've learned a few weeks ago. So when you see sarkos, you might think, oh, sarkos, that's a genitive, that's a masculine singular ending. It's not. It's actually a genitive. And you'll think like, wow, that is confusing. It kind of is. And this is where sometimes Greek students get tripped up a little bit. And so that's why this is going to be kind of important to understand. So how do you learn on this? Well, really it comes down to just understanding labials, velars, and dentals. If you understand PV, the P vita phi plus a sigma makes a psi. If you understand that kappa gamma chi add a sigma equals xi. And if you understand that tav, delta, and theta plus a sigma equals just a sigma, you're most of the way there, because then you know, oh, okay, I understand how I got this weird ending on this word. It ends in a consonant, plus this ending makes this new ending. And honestly, you're going to read the chapter, you're going to watch the video, you're going to do the exercises, and it's just going to be rough. This is one of those things that takes a while. If Greek was easy, everybody would do it. Okay. So here's a couple of tips. So I've got this chart on the left-hand side. So obviously you have to learn the endings, right? And then you've got to learn these labial, velar, dental, combine them with a sigma, and you get these letters. You should also know that a tav cannot stand at the end of a word by itself. That can't be the last letter of a noun. If it's by itself, if you have that by itself, it'll drop off. So for example, if you have a neuter word that ends in a tav, it will disappear. And you'll just think, hey, I thought this word had a tav at the end. Well, if there's no ending, it's the last letter on the word, it'll just disappear. And now you've got a different spelling for it. So you got to be aware of that. And then the ni drops out if it's followed by a sigma. So if you have a sigma following a ni, it will disappear. All right, let's look at some examples, because it's kind of rough. All right. So I just moved everything. I put it off to the side so we could talk about it, right? So the two tips I just gave you, we've got the labial, velar, and dentals up here, and then the chart on the left-hand side. And I've got three different third declension words, all right? We have a K stem, a word that ends in a kappa. We have a word that ends in a tav, like mat, and then a ni. So, for example, there's no word sark. That's just a theoretical root word for sarx, right? Onoma should have a tav at the end of it. Onomat means name. And then din, right? Which is a relative pronoun, or any. Okay, so we have here sark. You add a sigma to it. Now, sark ends in a kappa, so we learned that the kappa plus a sigma equals a xi, and so we have sarx. So what you'd have to know to understand sarx is what the root word is, and then plus a sigma, which is the ending, equals this new spelling, sarx. If you look down below, sarcos, that makes sense. The genitive ending for a third declension is omicron. And you just go forward like that. Now, let's move over to the mat, right? We have this word onoma. Now, if you look at the other patterns here, like for example, the genitive singular, it's onomatos. Onomatos. You've got a tav at the end of it. But in the nominative, there's no tav at the end. There was, but the Greeks didn't like pronouncing it. It felt weird to them when it was at the end, so they got rid of it. And so it just became onoma. So so these rules are explaining why the spelling is off. Why do you have a tav in one and not in the other? It's explained, well, because the tav can't stand at the end of a word. So that's why you have onomatos when it's in the genitive and onoma without the tav at the end when it's in the nominative. That's why in the accusative singular, it's onoma, again, without the tav at the end. And that's why you have onomata, onomaton. You can't have, and then the ending for onomasine is just different, and I can't explain that to you, so my apologies. But anyway, what you have here is, what I'm trying to explain is that there's a lot of spelling changes going on as you go through the paradigm. And if you understand the labiovelar and dental plus the sigma pattern, if you know that the tav can't stand at the end of the word, and if you know that a ni drops out when it's followed by a sigma, and you have this third declension chart all memorized, maybe you can make some sense of these third declension endings. I'm not going to lie, as you can see, they're a little bit of a headache. They are tough. You do your homework, you're going to be just fine. They don't occur that much, and then usually you can figure it out pretty quickly. Even if you just knew the endings, you'll be fine. And that's because when you memorize your vocabulary, the most irregular is this nominative singular. This is the one that usually throws people for a loop. Well, it's the one you're memorizing in your vocabulary anyway. So when you do your vocab, you're automatically learning kind of like the hardest one. So here's what I suggest when you're learning this is that you do your labiovelar, dental plus sigma. You get this chart figured out. You learn these two tips. Tav can't be at the end of the word by itself, and the ni drops out when it's followed by a sigma. And of course, you have to. This is the hill to die on. You got to know your third declension endings. You're going to be all right. All right, let's look at this chart. I want to explain a couple of differences. Obviously, you have the different stems. The sarx is one of the most irregular one, the nominative singular. So just pay attention to that. This accusative singular will also throw people off because you'll think it's the ending of the 2-1-2. So that'll be a little confusing. And I've noticed that the sarkis onomata is a little bit off. But if you look at the rest of the charts, besides those exceptions, everything else is pretty much the same as you've already learned. It should look really, really familiar. The datives still have the iota. The genitive plural still omega ni. Everything else pretty much looks the same. It's not too bad. You should be okay. Let's look at those endings again. When you're looking at just the chart, you'll see that the nominative singulars look pretty predictable. You will probably get confused when you look at the genitive singular in the third declension. You'll confuse that with the genitive, with the nominative singular in the 2-1-2 pattern. And then, of course, S, the nominative plural, is a little weird. Having said that, I mean, if you just memorize this chart, you'll be all right. It's not the end of the world. Okay. Here's the part that's going to make this bearable. when you're learning your vocabulary, you've probably noticed that some words have a weird ending in between the lexical form and the article. So look at to onoma. You've got this weird atos in between the article and the noun. Okay, sorry, the article and the lexical form. Atos is the genitive ending for this word. So this is telling you, hey, this word is a third declension noun. It ends in a consonant, and the consonant is a tav. And you might think, I don't see it in onoma. Well, that's what's happened. In the nominative singular, which is the lexical form, the tav is dropped off because it can't stay at the end of the word. So when you learn your vocabulary, you're learning, okay, nominative singular, right? To onoma. But you also have to learn with these third declensions, you have to learn to, it'd be tu onomatos. And what that does is you're learning, oh, okay, there's a tav in there. Onomat is the actual root. And that kind of tells you, it prepares you for some of the curveballs you'll see in these different endings. So if when you're studying, you say to onoma, tu onomatos, then you'll kind of associate the atos ending as a genitive to that word, and you'll kind of know the possibilities of what can happen. Look at that asterisk. Mounts includes this theoretical root word there, onomat. You could memorize that. That's just starts getting pretty heavy, and eventually, just because you'll become familiar with it, you'll memorize it anyway. But honestly, if you just say to onoma, tu onomatos, you'll probably be all right. I think that's easier, but you do you. Look at the next word, I sarx, and then you've got the entire sarcos at the end. So now you know what it looks like in the nominative singular, which is I sarx. So now you know it's a feminine. And then the sarcos tells you that there's a kappa in that root. And now you know what the genitive looks like. So this would be tis sarcos would be the genitive here. And so now you won't be surprised when you see sarcos in a word, and you'll know, oh, okay, right, I remember that's the genitive. It looks like a masculine nominative singular ending, but this is a third declension genitive. And it's just kind of tricky. I'll be honest with you. It'll take a while for this to kind of become clear. But once again, Mounts gives you that root word, and that's how these works. The same thing with soma. It gives you the somatos, so you could do tu somatos, and he gives you the asterisk with the root word. And that's what you've got to understand. Okay, I know that's a lot to throw at you. I want to do a couple examples of how to parse third declension endings. So let's get into that, and hopefully this makes a little more sense. You look at this phrase, and you look at onomati, and you say, okay, I did memorize a word like this. It's to onoma, tu onomatos. And so now you look at that tav in onomati, and you're like, oh, that's right. That's the full root word, and it's got that iota at the end of it. And in your head, you should be able to make sense of that as a dative, right? Whoa. All right. So we look at our chart, and we're looking on the chart for that ending, and we've parsed this, right? We've parsed this as a dative singular neuter, and we know it means name. So because it's got the iota and it's easy to find on the chart, basically all iotas are datives. So that makes it easy. The other thing that makes this really easy is that it has the article, and you've memorized your articles by now. So you look at that and you're like, that's a dative singular. So you know that's a dative singular. It means name. And because it's a dative, you're going to add the word to in front of name, to name. That's kind of strange. Well, I wonder what that sentence would be. And then, of course, you want to parse the next word, which is a genitive singular. It translates of me. honestly, we would say that my. We don't say of me, we say my. And then we smooth the whole thing out and you decide that's to my name. That's how that works. It shouldn't be too different from anything you've done. Obviously, the parsing is the same. The more difficult thing is remembering why the spelling is different from the lexical form. That's what makes this all tricky. And so that's why that whole explanation. Let's review this one more time. Let's go over it, and then hopefully with you reading the chapter, doing the vocab, and then doing the exercises in your workbook, this gets all crystallized here. Okay. So we said that we've got third declension endings that end in a consonant. And these are all the endings. But we said that some of these endings are going to look a little weird because the labials, velars, and dentals, when you add a sigma, they change. A tav cannot stand at the end of a word. So if you've got, for example, a word like onomat, and you decide to do that neuter singular ending, nominative singular ending, which does not have an ending, you've got that tav left hanging by itself. It's going to drop off. So the spelling is going to change. And we said that a ni drops out when it's followed by a sigma. So if you add a sigma to anything that ends in a ni, the ni will disappear, and you just have, you lose that ni. And so what we ended up with is this chart. You can look it over and kind of familiarize yourself with it. Notice how, you look at the K stem and you look, okay, what's happening with that K at different places? All right. In the nominative singular, it becomes C. In the dative plural, it becomes C again. And other than that, that's honestly pretty easy to see. All right. It's not that complicated. It's more complicated than the other endings, but it's not that bad. What about if you have a word that ends in a mat? So like to onoma, right? Technically it ends in a tav. Well, you notice that in a nominative singular, the tav can't stand by itself, so it falls off. Same thing in the accusative. And in front of the sigma in the dative plural, it disappears. That's about it. Other than that, it should be pretty straightforward. And then you look at the ni at the end. You notice the ni drops out before a sigma, so the nominative singular no longer has the ni in it. It's just these. And then the dative plural, the same thing. Before that sigma, it drops out too. Other than that, it's pretty predictable. So here's what we're taking away. The most important, the hill to die on, is you have to learn that third declension endings. You probably should also learn the labial, velars, and dentals added plus sigma. Those you got to know too, because the ending is going to change depending on if it's a velar, labial, or dental. And the last thing, if you can remember that the tav can't stand at the end of a word or the ni drops out by a sigma, that'll be helpful too. But like I said, the most absolutely critical thing is that you learn those third declension endings. Other than that, if you remember that when you're learning your vocab, you want to memorize that if you have that second, if you've got that genitive ending that's got the omicron sigma, you got to make a note in your mind that, hey, this is a third declension word. It's going to have weird spelling changes. And so you just want to make yourself aware of that and practice it and study it. And like I said, third declensions are tough. I recommend you say to onoma, tu onomatos, and e sarx, ti sarkos. And that way you're memorizing the gender, that's third declension. You're also memorizing that there's a kappa or a tav at the end of it. And then you're a little more prepared. But like I said, third declensions are tougher. This is one of the harder lessons, and this is one of the concepts that usually takes a little while before you feel really good about it. But if you're reading the chapter, if you're watching the video, if you're learning the vocab, and you're doing your exercises, I think you're going to be okay. So I wish you Godspeed, and I'll see you next time.